The laughter didn't stop because I yelled. It stopped because I didn't. In the church hall, under blinking Christmas lights, I held up my phone and read one line, steady, plain, undeniable. Tyler Brennan's grin stayed on his face for half a heartbeat, then slid off like it had lost its grip. Ray, my wife Linda whispered, half standing. Please. Tyler's voice cracked. That's not what it says. It's a public compliance notice, I said, still calm. Dated June 15th, senior staff list. Your name isn't there, and that title you've been bragging about, it doesn't exist. You could hear ice melting in a glass. You could hear a chair creak. Then you could hear the room swallow its laughter. That moment started 3 weeks earlier in our dining room in Cedar Falls, Iowa, when Tyler called me stinky across the Christmas table, and everybody laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all year. I'm Ray Caldwell, 57, Black Hawk County most of my life. I spent decades in trucking logistics and DOT safety compliance audits, accident reviews. I'm not fancy, I'm steady. The kind of man who keeps jumper cables in his trunk and extra gloves behind the seat. Linda had cooked the turkey a little too long, same as she always did. The house smelled like dry meat and cinnamon candles. She lit them every holiday because she said they made the place feel nicer. Outside, snow fell in thick, quiet sheets, and inside, Linda's family filled our chairs. Her sister Pam with her tight smile, Pam's husband, a couple cousins, and Tyler, 28, sharp haircut, polished, quarter-zip sweater, like he'd stepped out of a catalog. Tyler sat down like he was doing us a favor. He glanced around the table, then pinched his nose. What's that smell, he said. Pam giggled too quick. Oh my God, Tyler. Tyler pointed his fork at me. Ray, you come straight from the garage. I showered, I said. It's turkey and candles. He leaned back, eyes bright. Nah, it's you. Like VFW and Old Man Cologne. Kinda stinky. For a beat, the only sound was the wall clock ticking. Then one cousin snorted. Pam covered her mouth like she couldn't help it. Laughter rolled across the table, warm and ugly. Linda didn't look at Tyler. She looked at me. Her eyes said, don't, not tonight. Tyler, I said, keeping my voice level, it's Christmas. He grinned wider. Oh, relax. We're family. Then louder for everyone, some of us had to work our way up without smelling like a shop rag. Pam's husband chuckled. He's just messing with you, Ray. I stared at my plate. The gravy was already skinning over. I thought about the VFW fish fry off University Avenue, the burnt coffee, the old guys who didn't laugh at you for being you. I thought about how quiet respect used to feel. Linda cleared her throat. Tyler, be nice. But it came out soft like a suggestion. Pam tilted her head. You know Tyler really is doing well. Corporate and all that. Linda jumped on it eager. He is. He's making something of himself. Something, like I was nothing. My fork flexed in my hand. Anger rose slow and thick like used motor oil in an Iowa winter. I swallowed it. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to give them what they expected. Ray, Linda snapped suddenly, sharp stop. Stop making the family look bad. I blinked. I hadn't even spoken. Tyler smirked. See, even Mom agrees. He called her Mom like it was a title he'd earned. I'd met Linda when he was 9. His biological father vanished down by Des Moines and never came back. I taught Tyler how to change a tire in the Hy-Vee parking lot when his first beater went flat. I sat through his award nights and clapped loud even when he wouldn't meet my eyes. I covered a semester of community college when his loans fell through. None of that mattered when he wanted to feel big. Tyler wiped his mouth with his napkin and switched gears, like the insult was just an appetizer. Anyway, he said, big year for me. Promotion's basically locked. Pam leaned in. Where are you at now? Tyler brightened. Compliance side, corporate safety, real oversight. I sign off on high-level filings for the regional guys. We're headquartered out of Delaware, but my division runs Iowa and Minnesota farm contracts, transport, all that. Big money. Linda's face softened like she'd been waiting for this part. She touched his arm. Honey, that's wonderful. Tyler looked straight at me. See, Ray, this is what working looks like. And there it was, the part nobody else heard. Not because they were dumb, because they didn't know what those words meant. But I did. The way Tyler described signing off didn't match how that world actually worked. The title he used wasn't one you threw around at a dinner table unless you were trying to impress people who wouldn't check. And Delaware wasn't a flex. It was a clue. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. I didn't give Linda's family the satisfaction of watching me scramble. I just nodded like an old man trying to keep up. Tyler laughed and lifted his glass. Don't worry, he said. Next year I'll get Ray a cologne set. Something to cover up that stinky. The table laughed again, relieved I'd stayed small. I raised my iced tea. Linda didn't allow alcohol at Christmas because she said it made people messy, and took a slow sip. The ice hit my teeth. Inside my chest, something settled cold, clear, and quiet as fresh snow. Because Tyler had just handed me his job like a business card. And the details were wrong. The snow kept falling after everyone left, thick and quiet, like the town was trying to cover something up. Linda stood at the sink, rinsing plates that were already clean. She did that when she was upset, kept her hands busy, so she didn't have to look at me. The cinnamon candle had burned down to a stub, and the house smelled faintly of dry turkey and wet wool. Outside, the wind pushed snow against the windows in soft thumps. Well, she said finally without turning around, that went, okay. I hung my coat on the back of a chair. My gloves were damp, if you say so. She stiffened. Don't start. I didn't. She turned then, eyes sharp. Ray, you embarrassed me tonight. I laughed once, short and surprised. I sat there and didn't say a word. You didn't have to, she said. Your face said plenty. I thought of Tyler's grin, of the word he'd used, of the way everyone laughed and then looked at their plates like it was my job to make them comfortable. He called me stinky, I said. Linda waved it off. He was joking. Didn't feel like it. She sighed long and tired. You're too sensitive. He's doing well. He's proud. You should be happy for him. Happy? I watched snow pile up on the porch rail. I am, I said. I'm glad when anybody works hard. Then act like it, she snapped. Stop making the family look bad. There it was again. Same words, same cut. She went upstairs without waiting for an answer. The bedroom door closed softly like she didn't want to wake something. I stayed in the living room. The clock ticked. The furnace kicked on. I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the Christmas tree lights blinking on and off. Red, green, red, green. I wasn't angry the way I used to get angry when I was younger, hot and reckless. This was different. This was a slow pressure behind my eyes. A weight. I'd spent most of my life noticing small things because small things kept people alive. A mislabeled load, a missing signature, a timeline that didn't add up. You learn to trust patterns when you've seen enough wrecks on I-380 to know how lies end. Tyler's story had holes. I didn't want to prove him wrong. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to wake up in the morning and feel foolish for even thinking about it. But sleep didn't come. Around midnight, I grabbed my coat and keys and drove out to Casey's on University. The parking lot was half-buried lights buzzing over the pumps. Inside, it smelled like coffee that had been sitting too long and fried food that never quite leaves the air. The girl at the counter nodded like she'd seen me 100 times, which she had. Cold one, she said. Yeah, I said, gets in your bones. I filled a cup with coffee black and stood by the window. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Back home, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. The chair creaked under my weight. I told myself I'd give it 10 minutes, just enough to satisfy the itch and go to bed. I typed the company name Tyler had dropped so casually, the way a man drops a big word when he thinks nobody else in the room speaks the language. The search results loaded slow. My internet always did that when the snow was heavy. There it was, official website, press releases, a glossy page about innovation and values. I clicked careers, I clicked leadership, I clicked compliance. Names, titles, photos. Not his. I opened LinkedIn. Tyler's profile was public, of course it was. Big smile, new headshot, title listed in bold. The title again, the one that didn't sit right. I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. Maybe he'd just started. Maybe the website hadn't updated yet. That happened. I scrolled. Endorsements from people I'd never heard of. Buzzwords stacked like kindling. Dates that didn't quite line up. I opened a new tab and searched the company name with the word audit. An article popped up from a local Iowa paper. 3 years old. I recognized the reporter's name. She was solid. Quiet federal compliance review. Transportation contracts. Documentation issues. Nothing flashy. Nothing criminal yet. My stomach tightened. I read it twice, then a third time. I thought about Tyler's tone, about the way he'd lean back when he said Delaware like it was a magic word, about how he'd use sign off like a badge. I closed the laptop. I didn't want to know more. Knowing more meant doing something with it. The next day passed in a blur. Linda was polite and distant. We ate dinner without talking much. The snow stopped and the town went gray plows scraping streets clean. On Tuesday, my daughter Megan called from Waterloo. She's 32, level-headed, always has been. Dad, she said, Mom says things are tense. I smiled at the wall. Your mom always says that. She hesitated. She says you're digging into Tyler's work. I closed my eyes. Did she say that? She said you're being suspicious. I pictured Linda's face when she said it. The way suspicion was easier than apology. Megan, I said, have you ever heard someone talk about a job and thought, that doesn't sound right? She was quiet for a second. Yes. That's all this is. Just be careful, she said gently. I don't want you hurt. Neither did I. Friday night, I went to the VFW fish fry. The place smelled like beer and grease and old wood. Men my age sat with their backs bent and their voices low. Nobody laughed at me there. Nobody needed to. I told my friend Carl, who'd retired from the credit union, about a kid bragging about a job that didn't add up. I didn't say Tyler's name. Carl frowned. Happens more than you think, he said. Kids inflate. Parents want to believe. What do you do? I asked. He shrugged. You wait, or you check the paper. That night, an email landed in my inbox. No name, just a subject line that made my chest go tight. It mentioned a review, and a date, and a division Tyler had bragged about running. I stared at the screen, coffee going cold beside me. Because now it wasn't just a hunch. It was a clock. The thing about clocks is that once you hear them, you can't unhear them. That email sat in my inbox all night. I didn't open it again. I didn't forward it. I didn't print it. I just let it be there like a weight in my pocket reminding me where gravity lived. By morning, I decided on one rule: I wouldn't touch anything that wasn't already public. No favors, no sneaking, no crossing lines. I'd spent too many years telling drivers and managers that rules mattered to start breaking them now. After breakfast toast, black coffee, the radio mumbling farm prices, I opened the laptop again. I started where lies usually crack timelines. Tyler's LinkedIn said he'd been promoted last spring. The company's public filing said the compliance reorganization didn't happen until late summer. I pulled up the Iowa Secretary of State site and searched the company's registered agents. Same name as the article, same division, same slow trail of breadcrumbs. I took notes the way I always had: dates on the left, claims on the right. No drama, just columns. By noon, the pattern was clear. Tyler had borrowed language from job postings and stitched it together like a quilt. Close enough to sound impressive, wrong enough to fall apart if you pulled a single thread. What bothered me wasn't the bragging, it was the confidence, the way he'd used his mother's pride like cover. I drove to the credit union on my lunch break. The parking lot was slushy, and the doors whooshed open with warm air that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner. Carl was at his desk, glasses low on his nose. Didn't think I'd see you twice in a week, he said. I'm not here to ask for anything, I told him. He smiled. That's good, because I wouldn't give it. I laughed. I just want to know if something I'm seeing makes sense. I slid my notebook across the desk, careful to keep names out of it. Carl read slow and thorough. When he finished, he leaned back. That title, he said. Yeah, that's not how it works. So I'm not crazy. No, he said. You're just old enough to know better. On the way out, I stopped by the bulletin board near the lobby. Notices, community meetings, a flyer for a county ethics seminar. The date matched the email. That night at dinner, Linda watched me like I might suddenly confess to a crime. You've been quiet, she said. I'm usually quiet, I said. She pushed her food around. Tyler's having a rough patch. You don't need to pile on. I'm not piling on, I said. I'm staying out of it. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the set of her jaw. Saturday morning, I went to Hy-Vee for groceries. The bakery smelled like bread and sugar. I ran into Pam by the dairy case. She smiled like she always did, tight and curious. Tyler's doing so well, she said out of nowhere. Linda must be proud. She is, I said. Pam leaned closer. He mentioned maybe needing some help with an investment. Family only. There it was. I finished shopping and sat in the truck for a long minute, engine off breath, fogging the windshield. The anger came back then, low and steady. At the VFW that evening, I listened more than I talked. Old men telling old stories. One mentioned a kid who'd lost everything because he believed his own press. I drove home under a sky so clear it hurt. When I checked my email, there was another message, this one, from a public list. An agenda. Names. Dates. Tyler's name wasn't there. But the division was. And the meeting was scheduled for the following week. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Because now I knew something else too. If Tyler kept talking, he wasn't just going to embarrass himself. He was going to take his mother down with him. Waiting is heavier than acting. It sits on your chest and makes every small sound feel like an accusation. The week stretched out the way Iowa winters do, slow, gray, and stubborn. Snow melted into slush during the day and froze again at night, turning sidewalks into traps. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, and said very little. Silence became my routine. Not the peaceful kind, the careful kind. Linda noticed. On Tuesday evening, she stood in the doorway while I sat at the kitchen table, papers neatly stacked, laptop closed. I hadn't meant to leave them out. Old habits die hard. "What's all this?" she asked. "Nothing important," I said. She didn't move. "You've been different since Christmas." I met her eyes. "You told me to stop making the family look bad. I took that seriously." Her mouth tightened. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She hesitated, then said it anyway. "Tyler's trying. He's building something. I don't want you tearing him down just because you feel left behind." Left behind. The words landed harder than she probably intended. I thought about the years I'd worked nights so she could take weekends off, the way I'd quietly paid bills when her hours were cut, the way none of that showed up on a resume. "I'm not tearing anyone down," I said. "I'm standing still." She shook her head. "You're hiding something." That night I lay awake listening to the furnace kick on and off. I thought about Megan's voice on the phone asking me to be careful. I thought about Tyler's confidence, the way he'd smiled when he said Delaware. I thought about how easy it would be to delete everything and go back to being the quiet one. On Thursday, Megan came by. She brought a pie from the Hy-Vee bakery, still warm, and set it on the counter like a peace offering. "Dad," she said, lowering her voice, "Mom's scared." "Of what?" "That you're about to do something you can't take back." I nodded. "So am I." She sighed. "Tyler's not worth it." "This isn't about Tyler," I said. "It's about truth." She hugged me before she left the way she used to, when she was little arms tight like she was anchoring herself. Friday night I went back to the VFW. The fish fry line was long, the coffee weak, the talk quieter than usual. Carl sat with me and didn't ask questions. "You know," he said, "eventually sometimes doing nothing is a decision. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a coat." I drove home thinking about that, about how silence could be strength or cowardice depending on what you did with it. When I got home, Linda was waiting in the living room. No TV, no lights except the lamp by the couch. "Pam called," she said. I sat across from her. "About Tyler," she said. "He's asking the family to come to a New Year's gathering at the community hall. Wants to announce something." My stomach tightened. What kind of something? She looked away. An opportunity. I pictured Pam by the dairy case. The word investment. The way Tyler's stories grew bolder each time. Linda folded her hands. "Ray, please. If you have concerns, keep them to yourself. Just this once." I felt the weight then, the full pressing weight of it. The marriage, the years, the quiet compromises, the cost of speaking up. I stood and went to the kitchen. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen. One click would erase everything. Clean slate. No clock ticking. My phone buzzed. An email notification. Same sender list as before. Public, plain. Subject line, compliance review, final agenda. I opened it, read it once, then again. The meeting was scheduled for the afternoon of the New Year's gathering. Same hall, same building. I closed the laptop and walked back into the living room. Linda looked up at me, hopeful and afraid all at once. "I'm not hiding anything," I said quietly, "but I'm not lying for anyone either." She swallowed. "So what are you going to do?" I thought about the snow, the pie, the laughter at the table. I thought about dignity. "I'm going to listen," I said, "and I'm going to let people finish what they start." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The clock was done whispering. The community hall smelled like coffee, winter coats, and optimism that hadn't been tested yet. It was New Year's Eve in Cedar Falls, and the parking lot was packed tighter than it ever was for fish fries or blood drives. Strings of white lights hung along the walls, and folding chairs had been set up in uneven rows facing a small podium near the front. Someone had brought cookies. Someone else had brought a cooler of soda and cheap champagne they weren't allowed to open yet. Tyler Brennan stood near the podium like he owned the place. He wore a tailored navy blazer, no tie sleeves pushed up just enough to look effortless. That watch caught the light again, too shiny, too loud. He laughed easily, shaking hands, clapping backs. Every few minutes, he glanced toward the door like he was counting who mattered. Linda walked beside me, her arm stiff in mine. "Just, please," she whispered. "Don't do anything." "I won't," I said. And I meant it. I wasn't here to do anything. I was here to let something happen. Pam waved us over, excitement written all over her face. "Isn't this great?" she said. "Tyler's really stepping up." We took seats halfway back. Megan slipped into the chair beside me and squeezed my hand under the armrest. Tyler cleared his throat at the podium. The room settled. "Thank you, everyone," he began. "I won't take too much of your time." He talked about growth, about opportunity, about how the region was changing and how smart people got in early. He used words like compliance and oversight and federal alignment, stacking them carefully, confidently. Heads nodded. Pam beamed. Then Tyler smiled wider. "Some people don't understand how the modern world works," he said, glancing in my direction. "But that's okay. That's why leaders step up." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Linda's fingers dug into my arm. Tyler launched into details, numbers rounded too neatly, timelines too vague. And then he said it again. The title, the authority, the power to approve. I raised my hand. The room paused. Tyler blinked, surprised. "Yes," he said, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry," I said, standing slowly. "I'm not great with corporate stuff. Can you help me understand something?" A few people smiled indulgently. Tyler relaxed. This was familiar ground for him, explaining things to people he thought were beneath him. "Sure, Ray," he said. "What's up?" "You said you sign off on regional compliance filings," I said. "Is that before or after the internal audit?" Tyler laughed. "Depends on the quarter." "That's interesting," I said, "because the internal audit comes after sign-off in your division, right?" He waved a hand. "Details." I nodded. "And your division's headquartered in Delaware?" "Correct." "So your senior staff list would be public," I said, "because of the federal review." The room grew quieter. Someone coughed. Tyler's smile tightened. "I don't see what this has to do with—" "I'm almost done," I said gently. I took out my phone. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. "I looked it up," I said. "Public records. Anyone here could." I read the line aloud. Date, division, senior staff names. Tyler's wasn't there. "That's not updated," he snapped. "I thought that too," I said. So I checked the final agenda. I scrolled. This one's dated last week. Linda stood up halfway. "Ray." I kept my eyes on Tyler. "And this title you mentioned, it doesn't exist. Not in your company, not in Iowa, not anywhere." The room had gone still enough to hear the heater click. Pam's face drained of color. "Tyler." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I do," I said. "I did this work for 20 years. I know how titles work. I know how audits work. And I know when someone's using words to hide facts." A man in the front row asked quietly, "Is there an investigation?" I looked at Tyler. "You want to answer that?" He didn't. Linda sank back into her chair. Her hands shook. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," I said to the room. "But if money's being asked for tonight, you deserve the truth." Tyler grabbed the podium. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "It's a lie that's gotten too big." For a moment, nobody moved. Then someone stood up and walked out. Then another. Conversations started in whispers, then in low voices. Tyler stepped away from the podium, eyes darting, trapped in the space he'd built. Linda looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. The smiles were gone. The room emptied faster than it had filled. Folding chairs scraped against the floor. Coats were pulled on without conversation. People avoided eye contact as they passed Tyler, who stood near the podium, like he'd been unplugged from the wall. Pam whispered his name once, sharp and frightened, but he didn't answer. Linda didn't move at first. She sat there staring at the floor, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. Megan touched her shoulder. Mom. Linda looked up at me instead. For a long second, neither of us spoke. The years sat between us, Christmas dinners, quiet compromises, words swallowed to keep the peace. Then she stood slowly, like her legs weren't sure they remembered how. We need to go, she said. Outside, the night air was bitter and clean. Snow had started again, light this time, drifting down under the street lamps. We walked to the car in silence. Tyler pushed past us, phone to his ear, voice low and frantic. He didn't look back. The drive home felt longer than usual. Linda stared out the window. I kept my hand steady on the wheel, watching the road. At home, she took off her coat and set it on the chair like she always did. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd sat alone nights before, and covered her face with her hands. I didn't know, she said into her palms. I swear, Ray, I didn't know. I sat across from her. I know. She looked up, eyes red. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I thought about the times I'd tried to speak and been told to stop. About how silence had been easier than arguing. You asked me to keep the family looking good, I said. I tried. Her shoulders shook. I chose the wrong thing. We didn't fix everything that night. We didn't wrap it up with apologies and promises and pretend the cracks hadn't been there all along. But something shifted. The truth does that. It rearranges the furniture whether you like it or not. Tyler didn't come by for a while after that. When he did weeks later, he looked smaller somehow. Quieter. He didn't apologize, not really, but he didn't brag again either. The investment talk vanished. The watch disappeared. Life went on. One Friday morning, I stopped by the VFW for coffee. The place was warm and dim, familiar in a way that felt earned. Carl nodded when I walked in. Everything settled down, he asked. Mostly, I said. He smiled. Truth tends to do that. I sat there for a while, listening to the low murmur of voices, the clink of mugs. Outside, snow fell steady and soft, covering the streets the same way it always did without asking permission. I thought about dignity, about how it isn't loud and it doesn't need an audience, about how sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is wait, watch, and speak only when the facts are ready to speak with him. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been laughed at, talked over, or told to stay quiet to keep the peace, know this silence can be strength, but truth is what gives it meaning. If you believe in stories like this, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more real stories about patience, dignity, and quiet justice, you're always welcome to stay.